The New York Rangers claim Arthur Kaliyev off of waivers from the Los Angeles Kings. Was it a good move to pick up the former second rounder? We discuss, and we also hear from Eddie Garcia of Locked On LA Kings.
You're Locked On the New York Rangers, your daily podcast on the New York Rangers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back, Blueshirts fans, to episode number 1220 of the Locked On New York Rangers podcast. I'm your host, John Chick. Just want to thank you guys, as always, for making Locked On New York Rangers your first listen every day. We are free and available on all platforms, including YouTube. And we are, of course, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So, yeah, since the last time we spoke, the Rangers putting in a waiver claim, getting their guy, Arthur Kaliyev, a 23-year-old forward who was waived by the Los Angeles Kings. That's kind of where we got to, I think, begin today's conversation as far as this move is why he was placed on waivers in the first place, because this is somebody that is a former second-round pick by the Kings, so he's their guy, homegrown and everything. They obviously took him with a very high draft pick, and they subsequently waive him only a handful of seasons later. He is still just 23 years old. I'm seeing him listed mostly as a right winger, but he gives you some versatility. He also plays some left wing as well. 6'2", 209 pounds. He has not played in the NHL so far this season. He actually broke his clavicle during training camp in September, and then the Kings activated Trevor Lewis and Trevor Moore from IR, and Kaliyev was put on waivers. He was basically a casualty of the Kings getting healthy. 5 games for Kaliyev in the AHL this season, 1 goal and 1 assist. But like I said, to me, even before the Rangers claimed him, I did think this was kind of a surprising move by the Kings because, again, this is their guy. They're the ones that took him with a high second-round pick a handful of seasons ago. He's also very affordable, so it's not like he was, taking up a whole boatload of cap space. He's on a 1-year deal worth just $825,000. And then after the season, he will be an RFA with arbitration rights. So just kind of interesting that the Kings would choose to go down this road. His career thus far, he's played in parts of 4 seasons with the Kings. Now, his first season was in 2020, 2021. It was only 1 game. We can't really count that one, obviously, but he did score his first career goal in that game. Thus far, he has competed in 188 regular season games in the NHL, all with the LA Kings. 35 goals, 17 of which have come on the power play. I thought that was kind of interesting. 36 assists, 71 points. He's a -12, has 37 block shots, 104 hits, and 39 takeaways against 49 giveaways. Just 9 Stanley Cup playoff games for Kaliyev. No points in any of those. And 2 years ago was clearly his best season. That's when I think it started to look like, okay, maybe the Kings have something here, and he's beginning to find his way in the NHL. 13 goals and 15 assists for a total of 28 points in 56 games. So exactly a half point per game player, right on the dot. It's not a tremendously impressive total, but when you look at it relative to his ice time, which was around 12 minutes per night, that's a pretty solid output, especially for a young player. But then last year, a little bit of a step back, at least if we go just by points. He ends up playing in 51 games, 7 goals, 8 assists, so just 15 points. So not even a third of a point per game last year for Kaliyev. And then, of course, this year suffers the injury in training camp, has been out for pretty much the entire season. 5 games in the AHL, like I mentioned, but has yet to play in the NHL so far this season. We'll see if he gets his chance in due time here with the New York Rangers. Could even be in the lineup later tonight against the Stars. We shall see. And as far as like a scouting report, the thing that kind of jumps out the most and the thing that everybody seems to be in agreement on is the fact that this guy is a shoot-first winger. And that seems to be his greatest attribute as well. Eddie Garcia, like I said, we're going to talk to him, the host of Locked On Kings. We'll get to that in a little bit here. He seems to agree with that sentiment. He goes into that, attribute of Kaliyev in greater detail, and we will hear from Eddie a little bit later in the episode. But the other thing that I thought was kind of interesting is that Kaliyev has mostly been buried to the 4th line during his time with the LA Kings, at least for sure this season, which honestly, thinking about it and saying that out loud, it kind of reminds me of something that the Rangers would do. We've seen the Rangers take forwards in the 1st round or, maybe the 2nd round in certain cases, and they end up spending time on the 4th line. We saw it with Lafreniere. We saw it with Kakko. Lias Andersson pretty much only played on the 4th line whenever he was in the lineup with the Rangers, and I realized he wasn't very good, but still, it's a former 1st rounder, a former top 10 pick there that you send out there to play on the 4th line. Vitaly Kravtsov, it was the same thing. there's certain guys that you take that, maybe you take them kind of high or even not, but guys that seem to have scoring upside that can also play a fourth line style. I think Brett Perreault is a good example of that. We've mostly seen him on the third line, but he can play the fourth line in a pinch. But when you look at somebody like Kaliyev, his skill set just does not scream fourth liner really in any discernible way. And when you also factor in the draft pedigree, the fact that this guy was drafted to produce points and be a big-time contributing player to this Kings team, yeah, it doesn't really make a lot of sense that he play on the fourth line. Now, I mentioned Eddie Garcia from Locked On Kings. We're going to play that interview in just a second. He shines a little bit more light on that, and he kind of explains why maybe that was the case, why Kaliyev was there. So we will play that for you guys in a little bit. But, the move as a whole, I like it. There's nothing really to lose here. It didn't cost the Rangers anything other than a waiver claim, but you take a flyer on somebody that has some natural scoring ability. And I think one of the biggest things that Kaliyev is going to bring to the Rangers is this is somebody that has that shoot first mentality, and they don't really have a ton of guys like that. Somebody like Chris Kreider, I think at this point it's pretty obvious he's going to end this season with more goals than assists. But when he does that, it's not really the result of him like having this blistering shot. I mean, he does have a good shot, but most of his goals seem to come on those redirections, cleaning up loose change, in the doorstep or whatever it might be. Mika Zibanejad, he's somebody that in prior seasons had a heck of a one-timer, but that really has kind of just not been working for him this season, to put it very mildly. I mean, who is the Rangers' shoot first player? Who's their like bona fide sniper that they have? Cooley can maybe be that guy, but I see him as more of like kind of a well-rounded, all-around kind of a player. They haven't really had, unless I'm forgetting somebody, a true bona fide sniper, really since Frank Vetrano, the guy that just goes out there and it's bombs away every single night. It sounds like Kaliyev could eventually be that guy for the New York Rangers once he gets acclimated, once he gets his feet wet a little bit. And again, it does sound like that's his greatest attribute is his shot. So that's good. I think he's somebody that has a role that he could play here for the New York Rangers. The other thought that I had when looking at this trade is I kind of wondered, like, okay, could this be kind of a little bit of a look to the future? It reminded me a little bit, honestly, of, not too far before the letter went out when we saw the Rangers strike that trade where they sent Derek Brassard to Ottawa and they got Mika Zibanejad. And it's a little bit different. Obviously, Kaliyev is a waiver claim. The Mika for Brassard thing, that was a trade. Mika, even at the time, was somebody that was thought to have much higher upside than somebody like Kaliyev, and I think certainly that was and is the case. But, Kaliyev is a young player, 23 years old. I don't think the Rangers are going to go full-fledged tear-down rebuild this time like they did last time. But I do think you're going to see, as this season progresses, going through the offseason, heading into next year, you will see something of a retooling where some of these veteran players are on their way and they're making room for some younger guys. And what they get here with Kaliyev is a young player. You got him basically for dirt cheap. I mean, again, he's an RFA with arbitration rights when this season ends. I would imagine the Rangers are certainly going to look to keep him in the fold. Otherwise, I don't think they're, going to do this waiver claim, because really what would be the point? But you look at, Kaliyev and what kind of contract he's looking at after this season ends. He has the arbitration rights, but it's hard for me to envision him getting more than like $2 million a season, maybe $2.5 million a season, because the point production just isn't there to justify it. So I think he'll come in somewhere around that clip. And again, there's at least in a best case scenario, a chance where this could end up being a steal for the New York Rangers, somebody that, outproduces their contract, whatever his next contract might be. I also think that this move here could be the prelude to something else. I see some people saying that Kaliyev is sort of here to be Kakko's replacement. And, there's some truth to that for sure. But I think this might also set up the Rangers to do something else, because they haven't been shy about moving on from their own players this season. We saw Trouba get traded. We saw Kakko get traded. Entirely possible that somebody else gets moved as well. And if you do that, at least you've got Kaliyev in position here. You take him for a little bit of a test run this season. You see how he does. You see if you want to keep him in the fold next season, which I think they will. But does this set up the road to somebody else being dealt from the Rangers to somewhere else? One of these veteran players. The first name that kind of comes up, and the biggest name, is Chris Kreider. Now, it's also possible that part of the reason for this waiver pickup here is that Kreider is going to be out for a decent amount of time. We've seen him 2 different times this season miss games due to being injured. We saw him as the healthy scratch the one time, but he's also missed time due to injury. As usual, the Rangers aren't saying much. The NHL tends to be a little bit secretive when it comes to injuries, but Kreider's got the back issue. How long is it going to keep him out? We don't know. It's possible the Rangers don't know either. But it's one of those things, if he comes back, okay, great, but could he end up being injured a little bit later and have to miss more time? Is that back injury, is that something that could kind of flare up randomly, at any point during the season? Maybe Kaliyev is a little bit of an insurance policy. If Kreider ends up missing a significant amount of time this season, we will see. And again, also possible, we'll see if Chris Kreider gets dealt. It's going to depend on a lot of things. I think certainly how the Rangers do between now and the trade deadline will have a lot to do with it, but we'll see how that shakes out. Another name that kind of popped into my head as far as somebody that could be on the move is Riley Smith. And honestly, that could have been the case even without this claim of Arthur Kaliyev. But when you look at it now, all of a sudden, the Rangers aren't doing so good. They're on the outside of the playoff picture looking in. Smith is a little bit older. He's on the last year of his deal. And you might want to open up that spot for somebody like Kaliyev or somebody like Brian Othmann, who just got back from his injury. He's been playing well with the Hartford Wolfpack. And it's not a question of if, it's a question of when we see Brian Othmann with the Rangers this season. We saw him for 3 games last year, but I think this year it's going to be a little bit more of a permanent thing. And, guys like Othmann, guys like Kaliyev, maybe wanting to mix them into the lineup a little bit. Does somebody like Riley Smith become, kind of collateral, so to speak? Will he end up getting traded? That's entirely possible. And it's entirely possible, I think, that the Rangers could trade somebody like Jimmy Vesey. He's in the last year of his deal too. And it's kind of similar to Smith, where you kind of just open up that spot for somebody else, whether that's Kaliyev, whether that's Othmann. That remains to be seen. But obviously both those players with more upside than somebody like Jimmy Vesey. And I like Vesey, don't get me wrong. Gritty player, does some good things for the Rangers. But again, when it comes down to upside, Othmann and Kaliyev, I think, have him beat by quite a good margin. So yeah, a couple of different players, 3 that we just named there, that could be on the move partially as a result of this pickup of Kaliyev, but not certainly completely because of it. I was watching some Kaliyev highlights on YouTube and just trying to figure out, what kind of a player this guy is and what kind of role he's going to play for the Rangers. I mentioned that he's got a lot of power play goals in his career, or at least, relative to his even strength goals. I was watching some highlights, and one thing that really stood out to me is his one-timer, because it seems like he's got a lot of velo on it and a lot of accuracy with it as well, but he isn't out of control with it, if that makes sense. You think about a one-timer and you think about guys just like winding back and absolutely just tattooing the puck into the net. And hey, I love that as much as the next hockey fan. That's awesome. But with him, it seems like he's like under control with it. Now, granted, I'm watching his highlights, so you're not going to see instances where maybe he completely shanked a one-timer or fanned on it or just missed the puck entirely, or, shot it right into the breadbasket of the goalie. But I liked what I saw here. Like I said, it's a one-timer that's got a lot of velo. He seems to have accuracy with it, yet he doesn't sacrifice good contact with the puck just to get a couple more MPHs on the shot, if that makes sense. He seems to really like to fire from the right face-off circle. I saw a couple of different goals where he scored from that area on the ice. As far as other highlights, 2021, he had a hat trick against the Ducks. He also had a play where he absolutely clobbered Connor McDavid. It was away from the puck, kind of at center ice there. It kind of looked more than anything like 2 players colliding, although I'm not so sure Kaliyev really went out of his way to avoid the contact. McDavid went down. He was okay, but that obviously drew a crowd. The Oilers went after him, and just one of the first couple of things that popped up on YouTube. And one other move that must be mentioned here, Matt Rempe has been sent down to the AHL. He has 1 game left on his suspension. He can play on the AHL team all he wants. If and when he gets called up back to the Rangers, though, he will have 1 more game of his suspension to serve before he's eligible to return to the lineup. So that's kind of where things stand. And obviously, again, I like the move. It's risk-free, and there is at least some upside with Kaliyev. And I think he plays a role that the Rangers don't really have anybody playing right now, that shoot-first mentality, that shoot-first player for this team. So going to, in just a second, play a clip of our interview with, once again, Eddie Garcia, who does an awesome job with Locked On Los Angeles Kings. Definitely check out his show if you get the chance. We will do that in just a second. All right, we just want to take a minute to let everybody know that today's episode of Locked On New York Rangers is brought to you by our very good friends at FanDuel. From big upsets to game-winning drives, the NFL playoffs are better with FanDuel. Because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $200 in bonus bets. Win or lose, the FanDuel app gives you everything you need for live bets, same-game parlays, and so much more. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today and get started with $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Make this playoff season unforgettable with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. All right, so let's go ahead and keep everything rolling here on Locked On New York Rangers. Huge shout out to the everydayers, as always, for enduring through this trying season of Ranger hockey. But they got a chance tonight against the Stars to finally win back-to-back games for the first time since like mid-November. It's been a minute here, so hopefully they can get that done. Won't be easy. We'll see how it goes. We'll also see if Kaliyev ends up making his Ranger debut a little bit later tonight. But for right now, like I said, want to go ahead and play our interview that we did with Eddie Garcia. It's about 10 minutes long. He basically just gives us a detailed breakdown on Arthur Kaliyev, and he does an awesome job. Listening to this, talking with Eddie, I felt like I already got a better feel for, what he brings to the ice, what he needs to work on, why it didn't work out in LA, how it could work for the Rangers, all that good stuff. So yeah, let's go ahead and play that interview right now. All right, so with no further ado, let's go ahead and welcome our very, very special guest for today, the host of Locked On Los Angeles Kings, Eddie Garcia. Eddie, first of all, thanks for taking some time to join the show here, talk a little bit about Arthur Kaliyev, who was obviously just waived by your team, claimed by my team. It's interesting because Kaliyev, still just 23 years old, former second-round pick by the Kings. I just want to first and foremost get your reaction to seeing this happen, to seeing him place on waivers, because it surprised me a little bit, but you obviously see the Kings more than I do. So just your initial reaction to seeing Kaliyev get waived a little bit earlier.
I was not surprised to see it, and I was not surprised to see him claimed by a team. I think if I am surprised by something, it's that apparently no other team in the NHL would offer the Kings something for him in a trade. Because you mentioned his age. He's still young. He has an above average NHL shot, which I'm sure we're going to talk about some of the things he does well and some of the things he doesn't do well. And he is a guy who has a decent resume, played with some marquee players coming up. A fun fact for Arthur Kaliyev, by the way, he was born in Uzbekistan, but he is a dual citizen. He was raised in America, and as a matter of fact, spent a lot of his younger years in Staten Island. So he is got roots in New York there, so going back home a bit. But yeah, I was surprised that there wasn't a team that was willing to give the Kings something for him, because obviously something's better than nothing. The Kings right now had a couple of guys coming off injured reserve, and so they wanted to keep Arthur Kaliyev, but knew that there was no room for him on the NHL roster at this point. So they tried to get him through waivers, but I was not surprised that he ended up being claimed. I will say a little surprised that one of the teams that had a choice ahead of the Rangers didn't take him. So I think a very nice pickup for New York.
Yeah, I'm surprised that he kind of fell to the Rangers, quote unquote, just because, like you said, it's a virtually risk-free kind of a move. And to your point, Eddie, yeah, I'm surprised that the Kings weren't able to get, at least a mid-round draft pick for him, something along those lines. The NHL trade market can be very difficult to figure out, but I guess that'll be one of the unsolved mysteries as far as why they couldn't at least get something in return for him. But one thing that I'm seeing said a lot about Kaliyev is that he's a shoot first kind of a forward sniper type, and I was watching some highlights, and he does have a very impressive shot. Seems like he really likes that spot, right in the middle of the right face-off circle. I've seen a couple of different goals where he scored from that spot on the ice. So, is that his best asset, and is that something that you think he can bring to the Rangers, that shooting ability?
Without question. It's probably what's keeping him in the NHL or giving him an opportunity to try and stay in the NHL at this point. And that's certainly what the Kings were intrigued by. He was a 50-goal scorer in junior, for what that's worth. And you see a guy like that and you're like, okay, he's got great scoring touch. You can't necessarily teach that. Maybe we can teach him the other stuff. Well, it didn't really happen. Either the Kings didn't do a good enough job of teaching him the other stuff, or he wasn't receptive to learning the other stuff, or maybe something in between. But I think specifically it was a tough fit with what the Kings do. They were a very strong defensive team, and that's not his strong suit. Now, you can have a guy who's not strong defensively. Let's take, for example, with the LA Kings, a Kevin Fiala. Not the greatest defensive player in the world. He hustles and he does some good things, but he's in the lineup because of what he can do creatively, offensively. And you're willing to put up with what his deficiencies are defensively, with what he gives you offensively. And for Arthur Kaliyev, he just wasn't providing enough offense to offset the things that he didn't do well, specifically with a team like the Kings, who are a defensive first type of a team. He has a very, very good shot. He's a guy I think that can potentially help you on your power play, but he's not a guy who's very creative. If you have someone who can set him up, he can put it in the net, but he's not going to create his own shot. He's not real fast. He's an okay skater. His defense isn't great. He's not very physical. But what he does have is that great wrist shot, a nice scoring touch. So he's an instinctive scorer. So if you can get him to improve a little bit on the other stuff, then that's something maybe you'll put up with. I do think, though, he needs top 6 minutes to really be an effective NHL player. He wasn't going to get that in LA. He was going to be a fourth line guy, and he just is not going to get the minutes or the touches to be an effective player that regard, because he's not going to give you the stuff a typical fourth liner gives you, a spark, energy guy, physical guy, that kind of stuff. So it wasn't really a great fit in LA. The NHL teams love the whole change of scenery. Maybe he fits here, and maybe he will. And I wish him well. I think he's a good guy. He does have some skills, but just wasn't really a fit with what LA's got going on right now.
That was actually something that I was going to talk to you about. I was going to ask you a little bit later in the episode, but we might as well just do it right here and right now. The idea that, because I saw a lot about this too. He was almost exclusively used on the fourth line. So, considering this is somebody that was a pretty high draft pick, again, very early in the second round, the year that he was drafted, and does have, at least the shooting ability, maybe not the total package when it comes to offensive skill, but the shooting ability. Would you have liked to have seen him play somewhere other than the fourth line? Because just hearing you describe him, it doesn't sound like he's really like your prototypical, fourth line kind of a forward. Or do you think they were fair and that's kind of where he belonged, was on the fourth line?
Yeah, unfortunately for him, he's kind of a tweener. I don't think he has enough skill to be a top 6 forward right now, especially with the Kings. You got some very talented younger players that are producing a bit more and doing the other things that the Kings like their players to do. And so he was just kind of an in-between fit. Maybe a third line guy. You could see that, and that maybe was fair. But, the Kings were having success with what they were doing. I will say this, he is coming off an injury. He got hurt in training camp. It was also kind of some bad luck with Artie. He asked for a trade last year because he saw things weren't the writing was on the wall. He had fallen out of favor with then head coach Todd McClellan. So he had asked for a trade, and the Kings said they would try and accommodate him. And again, nothing materialized with that. So this offseason, he decides, all right, I'll give it another shot. Jim Hiller's now the head coach, maybe a new coach, wipe the slate clean, and we'll start fresh and see where it goes. He gets a broken collarbone getting hit into the boards in training camp. And so he misses the entire season up until a few weeks ago, plays a little bit in the AHL, and now he's ready to be, activated, and he's activated. And as I mentioned, the Kings have some guys coming off injured reserve, so now there's not a spot for him. So there's been a bit of bad luck with him as well. Thought maybe they could kind of start fresh and do a do-over, but unfortunately, fate just kind of wasn't in the cards for him like that.
Yeah, that makes sense. And obviously, that's, I guess in some ways, that's a good problem to have. Your team starts to get healthy, and how are we going to fit all these guys on the roster, right? And they end up having to move on from Kaliyev. One other thing that I noticed, just looking at his stats, and you can explain this, I think, better than I can, given, how often you've watched him over the past couple of seasons here. But I noticed, you talk about the points, the offensive production, 28 points in 56 games last season, nothing otherworldly, but, relative to his ice time, that's a pretty good total, a half point per game. And then this year, a step back in terms of offense, just the 15 points in the 51 games. Does this just go back to him not being, like you were saying, a fit for the style that the Kings play, or was there maybe less power play time? Because I noticed he scores a lot of goals on the power play. Just any reason for the drop off there as far as you can tell?
Well, just to be clear, the season where he had the 28 points in 56 games was 2 years ago. Then it was last year where his production dropped off. He kind of got in the doghouse with Tom McClellan, and this year hasn't played at all in the NHL because of the injury. So again, it just was kind of an in-between player. Like I said, I really think if you give him top 6 minutes and you have someone who can help set him up, I think he can be an effective NHL scorer. If you can't give him top 6 minutes and you don't have a guy that can set him up, then I think he's basically what he was with the LA Kings, which is a guy who isn't scoring enough to justify him getting top 6 minutes. So that's kind of the whole conundrum with Arthur Kaliyev. If he goes to a team that can give him the minutes and he has someone that can help him set up, he's got the shot to finish. Is that the case with the Rangers? You would know better than me. I don't know where they're going to fit him in or where they want to try him out at. But to me, that's the recipe for success with him. If you can give him top 6 minutes, if you can give him some power play time, if you can have somebody set him up, he's a guy who can finish for you. But it has to be under those kind of controlled circumstances, and that just wasn't the case in LA.
Yeah, that makes sense. And hearing you describe all that, it makes me kind of think like, maybe try him with Panarin kind of a deal. But by that same token, I don't think they're going to throw him into the fire like that right away. That's one of those things where if he sticks around next season, which I get the feeling, he's an RFA with arbitration rights. I get the feeling the Rangers will keep him in the picture. But yeah, I feel like that could be worth a shot somewhere down the road because he can shoot. Panarin can obviously pass. Maybe there's something there. I mean, what do you think? And Panarin, obviously, so.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, that the Rangers better than me, but that was the first thought I had, and I didn't know if the Rangers would want him playing, that high up in the order with Panarin. But Panarin can certainly make a lot of people look good, and again, he's a guy that can finish. So maybe that is a pairing that could benefit both.
Yeah, well, we'll keep an eye on it going forward for sure. I think the Rangers, there's nothing really to lose here. I'm very much intrigued by this player, and Eddie, this was a ton of fun, man. We'll do a full-fledged, full-on crossover episode at some point, as long as you're up for it.
All right, John, always appreciate it. Thank you.
All right, so big thanks to Eddie Garcia for jumping on to Locked On New York Rangers, talking with all of us here a little bit about Arthur Kaliyev and just kind of outlining who he is as a player and what he brings to the table. It was interesting to hear all of that. Reminds me a little bit of the Capo-Kakko situation where Kaliyev, like Kakko, might be a prime candidate for somebody that just needs a change of scenery, and obviously we keep our fingers crossed that is indeed the case with Kaliyev, and hope that the Rangers can, unlock something, find a way to, maybe not make him into a superstar, but make him into a solid contributing player for this team. Like I said, that shoot-first mentality is something that the Rangers, I think, could really use right now, and I did see, while we were playing that interview with Eddie there, that he will not be in the lineup tonight. Peter Laviolette has confirmed they're going to go with the same lineup for the last game. Jonathan Quick is going to be in net. Hopefully we see Kaliyev sooner rather than later, but understandable to go with the same lineup, at least for this game. And, Kaliyev can get acclimated and watch one game from the press box, but I do hope we see him in the lineup sooner rather than later. So in just a second, we're going to shift gears a little bit. I want to talk a little bit more about the World Juniors, which just wrapped up with the United States winning the gold medal. That means that Gabe, Perreault, Drew Fortescue, now two-time gold medal winners for the United States. They're obviously both prospects for the Rangers, and we will discuss that in just a second. All right, we just want to take a minute to let everybody know that today's episode of Locked On New York Rangers is brought to you by Gametime. I love going to live events, whether it's sports, music, comedy, theater, or anything else. One of my favorite memories was attending a concert last year, Green Day and the Smashing Pumpkins at Citi Field in New York. The energy and excitement were off the chart. Now Game Day has made it easier to get tickets for your favorite live events with their new feature, Gametime Picks. This feature filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats so that you do not have to waste time searching through thousands and thousands of tickets. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download Gametime today. What time is it? It is Gametime. All right, so we just want to go ahead and thank you guys, as always, for tuning in. Figure we can go ahead and wrap up today's episode by talking a little bit about the World Juniors and specifically the performance of the three Ranger prospects that took part in the World Juniors. First of all, big congratulations to the United States winning the gold medal for the second straight season. Just an awesome gold medal game between the U.S. and Finland. USA was down 3-1 late in the second period. They scored 2 goals within 2 minutes of each other to knock it down to 3-3, tie the game. We get a scoreless third period, and then United States wins the gold in the overtime period, the 3-on-3 overtime period. Gabe Perreault was fantastic in this tournament, former first-round pick by the New York Rangers. He wins the gold medal for the second straight season. He had an assist on USA's first goal in the gold medal game, the primary assist there. He had the puck a couple of times in overtime, too. I was wondering if maybe we were going to see Perreault get the golden gold medal goal, if you will. But that ended up going to Teddy Stiga. He scored the game winner there for the United States. But Perreault, tore it up in the tournament, had a case to maybe be the MVP. He ended the tourney with 3 goals and 7 assists in 10 games, which, interestingly, that is his exact same point total from the World Juniors last year. In that run, he also had 3 goals and 7 assists, and he also won the gold medal then as well. And he was a +10 this time around. And yeah, just did a fantastic job. Ryan Leonard, who plays with Perreault at BC, he ends up winning the tournament MVP, but Perreault was recognized as a World Juniors All-Star. Leonard was the captain. Perreault was one of the alternates for Team United States here. Leonard has a ton of buzz, though. I can't go crazy about him winning the MVP. He ended up with 5 goals and 5 assists for 10 points. He was also a plus 10, so very comparable numbers to Gabe Perreault, but you got to pick somebody. There were other good choices as well. Cole Hudson had 11 points. James Higgins had 9 points. Trey Augustine was fantastic in net for the U.S., so you got at least 5 different guys I think you could make a case for. Would have loved to have seen Perreault win it, but can't go crazy that he didn't. Like I said, there were a lot of great options here, and Perreault was nevertheless outstanding in this tournament. You had Gabe Perreault, we just talked about Gabe Perreault. We also had Drew Fortescue, defenseman, former third-round pick by the New York Rangers. He was on the top pair for the U.S. for, I believe, pretty much all of this tournament, certainly the majority of it. Getting big minutes, did not have any points in the 7 games, but points aren't really his thing. He was a +6 in the tourney for the United States. And as we talked about the last time we mentioned Perreault and kind of, the early portions of this tournament on here, very important prospect for the Rangers. All of a sudden, the Ranger blue line has a lot of uncertainty. It seems like there could be a lot of vacancies, maybe later this season, depending on what happens at the trade deadline, maybe going into next season. Drew Fortescue is somebody that the Rangers really need. He's really one of the only prospects as far as defenseman goes that's getting ready and, maybe ready for his first taste of NHL action. We will see. There's not a ton of flash to his game, but that's okay. I think as far as the Rangers are concerned, they just need a defenseman that's very steady and very consistent back there. Stay-at-home type is just fine by me. I'm sure that sounds good to a lot of you as well. Plays with a good amount of physicality as well. So Fortescue's important. Seems like one of those, almost like Braden Schneider, when he was coming up, safe floor kind of a player, maybe not like the biggest upside ever, but somebody that should be, a really solid defenseman for sure. And like I said, he gets his second gold medal just the same way that Gabe Perreault did. We also had Rico Grudig, a forward that the Rangers took in the 6th round. He played for Switzerland. Switzerland made it to the knockout portion of the tournament, but they lost 7-2 to the United States in the first round. Grudig ended up playing in 4 of Switzerland's 5 games. He had 1 assist and was a -4. Former 6th rounder who was 19 years old. He's been playing with HC Davos. We'll see what happens. Like pretty much every 6th rounder, there's not, an easy path to the NHL for sure, but it can be done. We've seen plenty of guys do it. Even some undrafted players have obviously had great careers in the NHL. He doesn't seem to have a ton of upside, and it's hard to find a ton of info about guys that are taken so late in the NHL draft. But, we'll see what happens. We'll track his progress just like we do with every other Ranger prospect. And if nothing else, he's gotten to represent Team Switzerland, his home country, on, a pretty big stage the last couple of years here. So good for him, and we'll see what happens. But as far as the tournament itself, it's awesome. It's just a lot of fun to see, your team's prospects. We've seen in other years, the Rangers have more prospects than they did this year. Just the 3 that I just mentioned. We've seen them with like 6 or 7 guys in there, but still nice to see them do what they do, and fun to see all these different prospects from all these different teams. This is the first time where I think a lot of NHL fans are really getting a good look at them. And like I said, highly recommend this tournament. I've mentioned that in the past. If you missed it this year, check it out next year. It's a lot of fun. I feel like upsets in this tournament are becoming a little bit more common. We saw Latvia over Canada. There were a couple of upsets last year as well. Canada fell in the first round of the United States this year. We saw, Czechia ends up with the bronze medal for this game. They beat Sweden in the bronze medal game. There are fewer games in this tournament now that end 11-2. That seemed to be pretty common for a few years there. It still does happen every once in a while. You'll get like a big time blowout. I think there was like a 14-2 game at some point this season, but it's less common. And, like I said, it's a lot of fun to watch and see these prospects do their thing, obviously before they make it to the NHL. So I definitely recommend it to anybody that has not tried it yet. But I figure we can call it there. If you'd like to get in touch with this podcast, please send an email to lockedonnyrangers@gmail.com. Once again, there's lockedonnyrangers@gmail.com. Definitely give us a follow on Twitter as well, @LO_NY_Rangers. Once again, there's @LO_NY_Rangers. And definitely subscribe to Locked On New York Rangers YouTube channel. Thanks again, guys. I will see you next time.